Hi, and welcome to the Community Advocate podcast. Today, we're chatting to the CEO of the Alliance for Gambling Reform, Martin Thomas, on some very pressing issues facing gambling in Australia. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you.
What does the Alliance for Gambling Reform stand for?
Yeah, look, the Alliance is looking to reduce gambling harm across Australia. It's not an organisation that's looking to stop gambling. We just want to make sure that we live in a society where people are safe from gambling harm. And far, far too many people, unfortunately, are digging a massive hole for themselves financially, and that's having a massive impact on families across the country.
What are some of the key issues that you're fighting? I mean, there's some of the negatives that you're trying to counter, but what are some
Yeah.
of the major things that are on your plate?
Look, we have a focus on three broad areas around gambling reform. So obviously, online gambling is the one that's certainly in the headlines at the moment, particularly around banning gambling advertising. We also have focused, and our heritage has probably been looking at the impact of poker machines across Australia. One of the few countries in the world where poker machines are on every corner, as distinct from just tucked away in a casino. And finally, we always had a focus on casinos themselves and the regulation of them, which it's almost impossible, it seems, to do anything wrong and lose a casino license in Australia. It's quite extraordinary the low levels that it's gone to. So they're the three areas. We're concerned with gambling per se, but we are also very keen to make sure that we give people who have lived experience and have been harmed by gambling a voice. So that's another key driver of what we do.
And the battle to ban gambling advertising, as example, which is very current. How have you approached? How have you tackled that? What is the issue for you guys,
Yeah.
specifically the alliance, and how have you approached it?
So Yeah, so we've been, I guess, extraordinarily lucky in the sense that a lot of the hard lifting was done in terms of a parliamentary inquiry. We obviously advocated in a long time in the lead up to that to put it on the agenda, but the inquiry headed up by Peter Murphy pretty much created the perfect blueprint for gambling reform in terms of online gambling in the country. It has 31 recommendations. The two headlines really, I guess, is the ban on gambling advertising and inducements. But there's others that are very significant, such as a national strategy to prevent gambling harm, a national regulator, all sorts of things. What we've found is, particularly on gambling advertising, there is such overkill now in the number of ads that are on our screens. ACMA did a assessment of this and found that there's more than 1 million ads in any one year. That has just built That's just pissed people off, basically. Whether they were for or against gambling, it has really changed the mood. The other element that I think has been really significant for our fight against gambling harm is parents feeling like, and with good evidence, that the big gambling is targeting their children and essentially grooming a whole new generation. They're doing that through sport and the strong association with sport. Now, kids will quote odds just as much as their favourite players, but also there's a subterranean and quite cynical effort to target kids on social media, and parents are both fearful and furious about it.
How have you approached that and tapping into that? That fury and that dissent, the reasons you just said. How have you
Yeah.
used that as part of your campaign? Like, how have you approached the issue to try and highlight it? And
Yeah, so our campaign's worked at a number of levels. One is trying to demonstrate public support. So we've done a online petition, which I think we had something like 35 to 40,000 people sign, which was extraordinary. We've also had campaigns where people can go online and write to their local MP and talk about the importance of implementing the Murphy report. We have, from a public point of view, we've also done very specific targeted campaigns in a number of key electorates, particularly more recently around the NRL Grand Final and the AFL Grand Final. People in those electorates would have received a text as they were about to watch the Grand Final saying something to words to the effect that we all love football, but we don't love football ads, and let's hope we can ban them for the next Grand Final. We also also have done extensive online campaigns with Facebook and others that have been really powerful. And finally, we had the luxury, I guess, of a major donor who gave us, in one instance, $50,000 to fund full newspaper ads. And this was quite a game changer for us. So we had a full-page newspaper ad in which we did an open letter to the Prime Minister and the opposition leader. It was in the Sydney Morning Herald, The Age and the Fin Review. And we got prominent Australians, and John Howard, Lucy Turnbull, we had Rosie Batty, Craig Foster, a number of both former politicians as well as really eminent Australians. And that seemed to have tipped, I think, put it on the political agenda much more than it was previously. So they were some of the things from a campaigning and a tactics point of view that proved extraordinarily successful.
Where are you at in the campaign? Like, you play a long game, but are you in a good, having said all that, are you in a good place in trying to achieve what you want to achieve?
Yeah, I think you always need to be patient because it always happens much slower than you think. We are at the crossroads right now. So our understanding is that the government keeps talking about an imminent response to the Murphy report. So they've had it for, I think, 15 months now without responding. But imminent, we believe it will be weeks rather than months now. And we've now had, I think, a number of Labor backbenchers, possibly up to 20, 25. Some have spoken out publicly, who are extremely concerned with the leaks that have happened that suggest the government's going to have a watered down response to the Murphy report. We believe that concern within the party is probably delaying a decision, which is probably good. We think the government probably is going to go and do a watered down response, so add restrictions rather than a ban, but they don't feel like, I think, they have the necessary cover to be able to do this. So it's at the crossroads. If they made a decision tomorrow, it would probably be a disappointing one. We're continuing to ramp up the pressure to make sure we can increase those numbers. Looking beyond that, we are very, very thankful that we have the support of a phenomenal number of crossbenchers. We have the support of MPs in both Labor and Liberal at the backbench level. We'd be hoping that Peter Dutton comes out and shows some leadership. The noises are that he's supportive of a strong response. One of the key protections for both the government and the opposition, because if they do this, they will be upsetting broadcasters as they come into an election year, is to have a bipartisan approach. Otherwise, one can be played off against another. So, I think we see our campaign as having a pivotal point now where we get a decision. And then once a decision's made, if it's a disappointing one, a campaign between now and the election and post-election, perhaps in a minority government. I don't want to be too defeatist, but by the time, if we haven't got reform that we need, if we're looking at a minority government, possibly post then, we'd be in a strong position too, we believe.
That's excellent. Yeah, and that's it's interesting when you put it in those terms, in terms of because that is the vibe, only from outside looking in. What I've been reading, these things get leaked, that read the government's response, but hopefully, just for the reasons that you've said, pushback by 20 MPs, those things happening behind the scenes, yes, hopefully delay means that's actually being thrashed out rather than being, because if they were sort of all in lockstep about watering it down, it'd probably be out.
I think that's right.
Released on a Friday night or that sort of thing, Yeah.
But I've got to say, I've been involved in campaigns with Mission Australia, campaigns for drug law reform with Uniting. I've been involved with overseas aid campaigns. And this is like no other in terms of the level of political attention that it's getting daily, the level of prominent Australians, prominent organisations. We are really engaging really strongly with other preventative health organisations, groups that are concerned about suicide, mental health. There is, I think its moment has come. I mean, we'd love the change to happen tomorrow, but I think we're getting to the stage where it is inevitable and they won't be able to hold back the push for this change. But yeah, whether it's months or years, time will tell.
Is it handy in a general sense, not just this, just inverted commas, this campaign, but having someone like, Reverend Tim Costello as part of the organisation? I mean, you obviously do what you do and the other members of the Alliance, but I just very quickly, I was a newspaper reporter for many years. I know you were in the media as well. I was on the Herald Sun and was covering gambling in all its issues, building of Crown in Melbourne, and Tim had a lot to do with Tim at the time. So I just know he's been around banging the gong on this for a long time. Has it helped to have someone like him with that, longevity as well?
It absolutely does. I think Tim is literally declared a living treasure in Australia. His campaigning on gambling, as you say, goes right back to when he was, I think, Mayor of St Kilda, and he talks about meeting an elderly woman who, by all accounts, was the loveliest person in the world, couldn't imagine ever being on the wrong side of the law, who was having to serve time because of a gambling addiction racked up on pokies. He talks about having presided over the funerals of, I think, up to 6 families now from people that have committed suicide because of gambling. He is extraordinary in both his level of commitment and his integrity and his contacts, as well as I'm not sure how he does it in terms of his patients, because they were very close to significant reform under Gillard with that Wilkie deal, which fell over at the last minute. What we're looking at now, this raft of reforms suggested by Peter Murphy, would be the most significant gambling reforms the country has ever seen.
Thanks. That's very well put, like in terms of wrapping it back into his, pedigree and what you're looking at now, which does emphasise that, as you said, it is a very much a point in time. And yes, it's good to see all that hard work, that you're on the cusp of hopefully something very good happening in terms of reform. I mean, I'm not anti-gambling either myself, but I hear you in terms of trying to punters. I don't need to tell it, punters. People are sick of. I'm a footy fan. I'm sick of seeing sports bets. It's stuff you've heard a lot. And you've got the Pope on board, I noticed as well, just as an aside.
We did get the Pope on board.
Go right to the top. Was that Tim with his contacts? Or?
No, I think that we would have liked to have claimed inside influence to the Pope to get a statement. I think it just reflects globally not only what's happening in Australia, although Australia seems to be the worst of the pack, what's happening from a sporting point of view in terms of logos and players, that the Pope highlighted his concern for that. And I think, the fact that when you really think about it, and when you look at the research, the model of the gambling industry is to have as many people as possible bet as much as they possibly can. The phrase that's used in the industry at times is to bet to extinction. And really, it is such a ruthless model that it's amazing that we put up with it as a society.
That's a terrible phrase. I've never heard that before, but bet to extinction, that's encapsulates a lot in terms of mindset, doesn't it? Like, I realise they're money-making companies, but like the human misery of it.
And most of it happens, like most of their profits come from a small percentage of people that can't afford it. So I think Roy Morgan did some research recently, which showed sports betting doubled. The number of people sports betting doubled in the last 5 years. And it showed something like 40 to 50% of their income came from 20% of people who were problem gamblers. The other thing, though, that I think has been really significant in this campaign is the amount of research that started to come out. So Grattan Institute did a report. Roy Morgan's done one. There's endless polls. And I think what it shows is a number of things. One is we now have new statistics around the amount of money people lose to gambling in Australia, which is now rocketed to $32 billion. And what we also are now having is, while we know that's a financial loss at a time when there's a cost of living crisis, that also creates social misery on an industrial scale. It looks at mental health implications. We know that domestic violence, a person with a gambling problem is 3 to 5 times more likely to be in a relationship that's violent, with partner violence. And some research suggests that up to 20% of suicides in Australia could be linked to gambling harm. So the more we flesh that out, I mean, ironically, because many governments are addicted to gambling income, there's not much government funding for this research. So a lot of it's happening at a private level. But we certainly feel that huge amount of evidence that helps us to ride a crest of a wave on this campaign that both keeps it relevant and newsworthy, but also grounded in evidence.